Good morning. My name is Sonia from TechnologyCatalogue.com, and I would like to welcome you to our new webinar about artificial intelligence applied to the energy sector. Before leaving you with Sid Gupta, the founder of Nesh, I will briefly introduce you what we do at Technology Catalog and the structure of this webinar. So at Technology Catalog, we want to make finding technology in the energy industry very easy and immediate, together with all required support to deploy these technologies. As a matter of fact, a current problem is that there is a very wide range of available solutions which can cause confusion about what are the best technology investments for your business. And we really want to solve this issue. Another good point is that it's a great opportunity to explore new technologies without having to travel. I would like to invite you to visit our website to find and compare new technologies that can have a huge potential to enhance your business. Just to give you general information about the webinar, it will last around 25 minutes. The final 10 minutes are going to be for your questions. So if you have any, please use the chat box on your right side. I will now let the stage to Sid, who will lead this webinar and sharing his insights on how to use artificial intelligence applied to the energy sector.
Thank you, Sonia. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sid Gupta. I'm the co-founder and CEO of an energy tech startup based in Houston called Nesh. If you can see me, you can probably tell it's if I sound groggy, it's in the middle of the night here in Houston, about 2 a.m. But I'm not. I'm super excited to talk to all of you today. Today I'd like to tell you about what we are building here at Nesh. So my plan for the next 20-25 minutes or so was to kind of give you a background on conversational AI, how we are using conversational AI in Nesh, and end with a live demo so you can see Nesh in action and see how she works. So to understand Nesh, I sometimes describe her as imagine if Alexa and Siri went to school and got engineering and business degrees. Essentially, that's what Nesh is. When we first started Nesh, she was able to answer maybe 5,000 questions. Then it increased to 50,000 questions, then to 500,000 questions. And today, Nesh is about close to 1 million questions that she can answer. So she's learning pretty quick. To understand how Nesh works, this is a scenario that we have seen play out many times in the companies that I've worked in and we have worked with, where a group is working together on some problem and a question gets asked in the context of that work. And more often than not, people in that group don't have the answer to that question right away. So somebody has to step out to find the answer to that question. And in this case, it's Josh. Now, he knows he has a couple of options. He can either go ask a colleague, or he can go look through some internal database or dashboard that he has access to. Now, with people working remotely, most likely it'll be option number 2, and it takes some time. It can take anywhere between 10 minutes to an hour, depending on how complex that question was. And he comes back and provides the answer back to the person who had originally asked. Now, this takes a while. It can take a long time depending on the complexity of the question. And by the time that the need for the question may have passed or something else has come up. And hundreds of thousands of such questions get asked in a large company every single day. And what ends up happening is that energy companies, they waste a lot of time looking for answers in data sources that they already have access to. And this is a big problem. It's about $84 billion in lost cash flow every year across the entire energy value chain. That's the problem that we're trying to solve with Nesh. This, in terms of time, it's about 8,000 years every year. So that is a massive amount of time wastage and money wastage that is happening in the industry. And we are trying to shrink that so companies can do more with less resources that they now have access to. So we started Nesh with a simple premise, was that what if I could speak to the data that we have in the company? We are already doing that with technologies that we have in our home with tools like Alexa and Siri. So we felt that why can't we bring that same conversational experience into our workplace? And can we not just simply speak to the data that we have access to? So that was our mission statement when we started Nesh. And what Nesh is, it is a conversational AI for search and analytics that is designed to find answers to your technical and your business questions 10 times faster through the power of natural language processing. And she has certain superpowers. She combines the capabilities of a chatbot with the analytical capabilities of a business intelligence tool, with the search capabilities of a search assistant. And since we have been born and raised in the energy industry, Nesh has been trained from the ground up to query and perform calculations on data that is present throughout the energy industry. So she understands the way people talk, the kind of things that they ask for, and she understands that jargon very well. Now, before we go into the details of conversational AI, I just wanted to preface this, that conversational AI is not a foreign concept for enterprises. We have been using this for a while, and you probably recognize it from those chatbots that live in the bottom right-hand corner of a website that you might visit. That's the idea of a conversational AI that enterprises are used to. When you go to a website, you could talk to a chatbot, and that replaces some of the customer service effort that an organization might have. And that's essentially what conversational AI is limited to within enterprises. It is that chatbot that lives in the corner, and it is often used for customer-facing touchpoints. We have not seen any robust solution that helps internal employees, internal team members to find answers for business-related use cases. So that's the category that we're trying to create. Before we go into the details of Nesh itself, how it works, let's look at conversational AI as a concept. What is it? How does it relate to the other areas of AI that we are familiar with? So this is a little bit of a messy Venn diagram of how AI sort of sits in conjunction with the other areas. So you can see sort of four main colors and themes over here. There's the green theme, there's the blue theme, there's the yellowish theme, and there's the pink-purple sort of a theme. So the blue is AI, mostly used for understanding and analysis. Then there's green, which is search, mostly used for search, pretty self-explanatory. Then there is the purple, that is business intelligence, predominantly used for slicing and dicing and calculation on the data. And then there is the yellow, which is the data itself, which forms the basis of everything else that we're doing. And none of these other three things will work without the data. And you can sort of see how these four areas, they intersect with each other. Within AI, there's a subspace of machine learning and also natural language processing. And within natural language processing, there are three different areas called natural language generation, question answering, and NLU, which is natural language understanding. So that's kind of how this whole world of AI and search and business intelligence and data kind of sits with each other. So if we put some brand names on this, these are some of the brand names that you might recognize. There's Google, which is in search. There's Alexa, which uses NLP. There's Spotfire or Tableau, which is business intelligence. And there's IBM Watson, maybe a tool you're familiar with that uses deep learning to do some of the work that it does. So those are some of the brand names if you were to put where each one of these areas, how different companies are leveraging it. But typical conversational AI, typical chatbots, they usually leverage those three highlighted areas: natural language understanding, natural language generation, and question answering. So they basically understand the question, generate an answer to the question, and then give back a response to the user. And that's what typically conversational AI does. What we felt as technical users within a company, those three areas are not sufficient to provide value to a user, especially petrotechnical users or engineers and geoscientists who are working with the energy companies that we are trying to work with. So we expanded our reach of conversational AI to cover a few more areas. So this is what Nesh covers, is natural language understanding, question answer. We also combine the capabilities of a search engine, so you can look through data that you are connected to. We also have business intelligence capabilities, so you can visualize and analyze data better. And also the concept of big data. So you can throw large volumes of data at it, and Nesh can still be able to parse through that. So we'll look into a little bit more detail, but hopefully this gives you an idea of the lay of the land as to where Nesh sits and how conversational AI typically works. So how does Nesh work? Let's break up the problem into kind of two simple steps. This is sort of a high-level architecture diagram of how Nesh works. On the left-hand side, Nesh is connecting to the different data sources that she can connect to and access. So she can connect to any kind of PDF documents that you have within your company. She can connect to the entire internet, or to specific web pages, to text files, to emails, through any of your Office documents like Word, PowerPoint, or Excel, and even to data sources through an API. So once she connects to those data sources, she does two things with it. She uses deep learning to search through all of that information, to find the relevant facts that are in there, and then she pushes them into this graph database, which is like this massive graph database, which is essentially used to structure all of that unstructured data. Once that is done, I'll skip over to the right-hand side. The NLP, or the natural language processing engine, comes in, whose job is to train on that data so she can anticipate and understand what the user is asking her about. So when you ask a question, Nesh can actually make an interpretation of what that question needs to do. So, and in the middle sits the insights engine, and the insights engine job is to actually look at the data to provide insights to the user. So you can see AI is used in two ways here. On the left-hand side, AI is used to perform search and extraction and discovery of the data from all of these unstructured sources. And on the right-hand side, AI is used to understand the user's question so she can fulfill the request. So you can see AI kind of works hand in hand on both of those sides to do a specific thing. But let's not look at this in an abstract way. Let's see how Nesh actually works on a specific use case that we'll be talking about today. So that specific use case is about competitor strategy. This is a company's desire to know what other companies are up to and what they are doing and what their blind spots are, so they could make themselves better. So we'll focus on that specific use case. And that same diagram that we saw earlier is slightly modified. And you can see the only thing that is different here is on the left-hand side, the data sources that we are connecting to. So in this case, we just changed the data sources and we are connected to SEC data, which is essentially disclosures that US-based public companies have to make. And we're looking at all the 10K and the 20F filings that those companies are making. We're also looking at the news articles and the press releases that those companies are putting out, or some third parties are putting out. The company's annual reports, the earnings call transcript that they have, the financial disclosures that they have, and some of the commercial public data that they are that we also have access to. And we'll break this problem down into kind of two parts. We'll look at on the left-hand side how that data is ingested, and we'll look at on the right-hand side how that data is analyzed. So let's look at the first step first, is how is that information kind of taken into Nesh. So the first step is data discovery, extraction, enrichment, and blending. So this is where we look at all of those data sources that we just saw, the SEC, the earnings call transcript, the annual report, and the financial stock data. We try to combine all of that. We extract all the relevant information. You can see some examples over here, the pieces that are highlighted. We extract all of that unstructured data from these documents. We blend all of those information together so they're all kind of combined into one. And we put that into this concept graph that you can see a snapshot of on the right-hand side. This concept graph is massive. This is just one small screenshot of what that looks like, but it has over 1 billion nodes, depending on the data source that we're looking at. But that's what it looks like. It takes all of that information, blends it, and puts it into a graph. And now this graph is super powerful in that you can analyze it and slice and dice the data. So that's the first step, is you get the data out of all of these documents into a more structured space. The second step is now, how do you understand what the user is asking Nesh that question? So the first step to do that is to build the natural language understanding model. This is similar to how you teach a child how to talk. You teach a child how to talk by talking to them in small sentences, and then from there, the child keeps understanding more and more things. So the first thing we do is to add training phrases into Nesh. These are training phrases that we have added, but then you can also add more training phrases so she can understand you. And then you classify them into intents. Intents are certain things that you want the smart assistant to do. And we classify them, and then we tag entities in it. This is sort of a more supervised way of learning, where you tag the certain entities so Nesh can recognize what are the things people are asking her about. And then that NLU model is built. Essentially, it's a deep learning model that gets built. And then once that model is built, Nesh is able to parse through the question that you ask her. So let's say you ask her a question, what is the revenue for Chevron? Nesh will be able to predict that this question is most likely asking for to find a time series data. That is, pull out the revenue. So that's how the intent understanding is built, which is the step number 2. And then once the intent has been recognized, the next step is to recognize the entities that are being expressed in the question. So let's give you an example. So if somebody asks, tell me something interesting about Shell, the first thing Nesh will notice is that, hey, looks like there's a mention of this word Shell over here. This is one of the companies that I know about. So she'll pull out that entity. But the next step, what Nesh will do, it will try to figure out, well, what is it that the user is trying to ask me about Shell? He or she did not mention that. So then go back and say, well, I know a few things about Shell. What do you want to know? Do you want to know, let's say, the debt, or do you want to know the divestments of Shell? Let's say the user picks debt. Then Nesh will say, well, okay, I have a few types of debt. What type of debt do you want to know about? So then the user can pick long-term debt. And now Nesh has all the entities that it needs to parse through that data. So now it has Shell and it has long-term debt, and it can parse through all of that information. So this is where the graph is very helpful. If we had not structured the data, Nesh will not be able to navigate through that graph to find the relevant information that it needs to present to the user in that context. So this is the final step, is being able to parse through the entities so it can provide the answer to the user. So we'll see in a demo how it works, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how that magic kind of happens in the background. So what is the value proposition to this workflow that we just talked about? So we actually implemented this for one of the customers, and we analyzed all this publicly available information, and we helped their analysts kind of reduce their analysis time from about 25 minutes to 35 seconds per question. So that was an annual saving of about north of $2 million for that just one team who was using Nesh for that specific workflow. So before I go into the demo, one of the things I wanted to talk about is, when is conversational AI a good tool? Because it is not always a good application to use. Not every workflow is a relevant workflow for conversational AI. So if you see yourselves looking at a lot of unstructured data on a regular basis, conversational AI is a great fit for you. If you find yourself looking at information that is partly in some database and partly is some PowerPoints and PDFs, conversational AI is a good tool for you, because you can combine all of those data sources into one. If your company generates a lot of reports, like PDFs and PowerPoints or Word documents or whatnot, and those reports are underutilized and not fully leveraged, then conversational AI could be a great tool for you, because you can ask questions about all of those reports without having to read through a 60-page document. But on the other hand, if you want to run calculations on your data and want to visualize it in many different ways in a very flexible way, conversational AI may not be a great tool for you in that case, because business intelligence tools like Tableau and Spotfire can do that job more effectively. It can work hand in hand with it, but may not be a standalone tool that provides that solution. And if you're looking at automating a specific workflow that you run on a regular basis, then instead of conversational AI, you could use something like RPA, or robotic process automation. So that could be a good candidate for that. But if one of those top 3 areas that I mentioned before, where there's a lot of unstructured data, it could be a great fit for conversational AI. And one last thing is some of the areas where we see conversational AI being a good fit. So corporate strategy and competitor benchmarking is one such area. We'll see in a demo what that looks like. But it is a great area for conversational AI where it can be utilized, because there's a lot of unstructured data in that space. It is a very good tool for mergers and acquisitions because you're looking at a data room full of data. It can be used for exploration studies, can be used for health and safety, geotechnical, quality assurance, maintenance, and design and commissioning. And if you notice, there's a common thread running across all of these use cases. They all have a lot of unstructured data in it. And anywhere where there is information like unstructured data, or maybe a blend of structured and unstructured data, conversational AI is a great tool, because it can help you discover information much more faster. So with that being said, I'll switch over to a live demo and give you a quick rundown of Nesh and see how it works so you can see it in action. So I'll stop sharing my slides and I'll switch over to a live demo. So let me just do a quick refresh. Hope you can see my screen. So this is what Nesh looks like. We go to a URL, and this instance of Nesh is connected to the publicly available information that we'll use for corporate strategy and competitor benchmarking. So let's look at the data set that Nesh is connected to. So you can see Nesh has access to the finance data, the stock price, news articles, SEC data, earnings call transcript, commodity prices, all of this information. You can add more data sources to it as well. And you can kind of see what are the different companies that we're tracking here. We have a bunch of about 30 companies. You can add more companies to it too. We have companies across the entire energy value chain. We have stock price information, news articles, SEC data for it. But let's start asking a question. Now we can actually start asking questions. So let's say I want to know, hey, Nesh, tell me something interesting about Shell. So Nesh will come back and say, well, what is it that you want to know about Shell? There are a few things that I know about it. So you can keep going. You can look through all the information that Nesh has available about Shell. But let's say you're interested in CapEx. Is how much money did Shell spend? So Nesh will now come back and say, well, what frequency do you want to look at this at? So I want to say, well, I want to look at it annual 4 years. So Nesh will give you the annual 4-year spend of Shell. So you can see they spent close to $23 billion last year. So, and at the bottom, you can see Nesh gives you also some statistical analysis of how Shell compares to the peers, and are they lower or higher than the average of that peer group. So you can look at that as well. But let's say I want to ask a follow-up question is, well, okay, what are some of the acquisitions that Shell made? So let me correct that spelling. So what are the acquisitions that Shell made? So Nesh will go find that. So, okay, but these are the acquisitions that Shell made in last year. So we can see, well, okay, maybe a part of that CapEx was spent there. So let's say now you want to find out about the acquisitions that other companies made. So you can say, well, what about Exxon? What acquisitions did they make? So Nesh will now go look through Exxon and then find out what the acquisitions that Exxon made. So you can see it's doing that search pretty fast. Let's say you want to, looks like Exxon didn't make too many acquisitions. Let's ask for another company. Well, what about Oxy? So Nesh will carry the context forward. It knows that you're still asking about acquisitions, so it'll just keep doing that. So you don't have to keep repeat that question again and again. You can see it finds the information about Oxy. Now, let's say, well, looks like these are the acquisitions that Oxy had made. Now, say I'm concerned about, like, okay, which companies actually talked about climate change, because I'm looking to see which companies are interested in climate change. So I can say, well, okay, which companies discuss climate change. So now Nesh is actually reading through all the companies' information that she has access to, and then trying to figure out, well, which are the companies that talked about climate change. So you can see it gave you the detailed background. Okay, well, it looks like Shell talked about climate change, and these are some of the climate accords in Netherlands that they discussed, and you have Exelon, Conoco, Plains on America, and all the different kind of information that it can find. It quickly brings that to you. And the way the information is presented is sort of like a news article. So there's a headline, and then there's a paragraph at the bottom, and the headline is supposed to be a summary of that entire paragraph. So you don't have to kind of read through that entire thing, even if you don't have to. But one of the companies that I see missing on this list is Exxon. So let's say, well, what was Exxon's area of, like, in ESG that they talked about? So I can say, well, show me the ESG for Exxon. So I want to know, like, what kind of ESG parameters that Exxon mentioned in their earnings call or in their public release. So you can look through all of that. So you'll say, well, okay, Exxon talked about energy efficiency programs. These are the things that they said. They also talked about fossil fuel reduction. These are the things that they talked about there. Renewable energy projects they're investing in, safety that they're investing in. So you can see Nesh categorized all of that information and are able to kind of ask questions about it, and making that entire interaction pretty seamless. And one last thing you can do, you can also look at news. So let's say I want to say, show me the news for Chevron. So I'm curious to know what kind of news Chevron has been featured in. It'll bring that up. And you can see it gives you just the headline. And if you want to actually read the information to you, click on the source, and it'll just take you to wherever that information came from. And you can read that over here as well. So you can see it kind of gives you that one entire, turn my screen sharing off. I'll start sharing again. And you can sort of see, so that's how it works. And so that was the demo. And I know I'm coming up on about the 25 minutes that I promised. So I'll leave you with my contact information. If you have anything else that you want to ask me, you can reach me out directly. But I'm happy to take any questions that you have right now for me. Thank you very much for your time. I'll see what questions you all have for me right now.
So thank you so much, Sid, for this amazing presentation. It was super interesting, and I'm sure that everyone from the audience also really appreciate it. I see we already have a couple of questions. The first one is from Tim Black. Do you need internet connectivity all the time, or can you run a local version of Nesh in an internet challenged environment?
That's a fantastic question, Tim. We can run locally on a cloud environment. Unfortunately, it is a cloud-based application. So we do need internet connectivity to be able to access that cloud environment in that moment, even though it could be running on a customer's version of the cloud. It does not necessarily need to be hosted by us, but even to access the customer's cloud, there needs to be some sort of a bandwidth to be able to access that. So the short answer is yes, we do need internet connectivity. However, in the field too, people who are kind of taking Nesh on the go, they are still able to access it with limited bandwidth, because you can see that there's not a whole lot of information that is being sent back and forth between the user. So you can do it that way. The other thing I would add to it is that you can also text Nesh as well. So you can text Nesh from your phone, and Nesh will reply back to your phone as well. So that's another way of doing it. If you don't have internet connectivity, a text response can also be gotten back through there.
Good. Then the second question from Melissa. Thanks for the presentation. How long have you been training Nesh to do her job?
Yeah, so it had taken us a while. So we started the company in 2018 and the summer. So it's been about 2 years we've been kind of working on the product and training her. And that was one of the most difficult things to do. It looks simple on the surface when you use it, but there's a lot of things that are happening in the background. So when we first started Nesh, the first thing we had to train her was to understand just simple English. So we kind of trained her on that. And once that English understanding was there, then we started introducing domain data. So we kind of went through all the different domains of production, subsurface, drilling, completion, finance, ESG, all of that. So over time, she has learned all the different jargon and the words that are being used. But so we have kind of gone through that two-year experience so far and journey to kind of train Nesh over time in all of these different areas. And we still have some ways to go depending on the use cases that come to us.
Thank you. Then if we can wait for more questions to come. In the meantime, I would like also to ask you something myself. So how long does it take to deploy Nesh for a specific team?
Yeah, it takes anywhere between, it can take anywhere between 6 to 10 weeks to deploy Nesh. That's the typical range that we have seen. So there's kind of two things that we need from the team to deploy Nesh. One is the data sources that they want us to connect to. And the second thing that we need is the type of questions that the user want to ask us. Because with those two things, we can start updating the language model of Nesh. So just with those two things, the data sources and some examples of questions that they want to ask us, we're able to deploy Nesh for that team about in that 6 to 10 week time period.
Okay. I see there's another question coming in. So what about different languages?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So far, we have supported English only. Most of our customers that we have worked with, that's the predominant language of business that they're using. But Nesh can be trained in other languages. The natural language understanding model that we use, it supports multiple languages. We just haven't come across a use case. So technically, it's possible, but we are just interested to know what is that new language that you're thinking about where to use Nesh for.
Okay, thank you, Sid. Then let's see if we have more questions coming in.
I see another one. I think it's from Tim. His question is about connecting to private data sources through an API.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, we can. So if one of the slides showed at the bottom that there was an API connection, so that's actually one common way we bring in information from structured sources of data through an API. So let's say you have the third-party app that provides some sort of a data stream, and Nesh can connect to that API through our own API gateway. And then we can bring that information into Nesh and access that through the conversational UI layer that we saw earlier.
Super clear. And can Nesh be applied to any area of expertise, or?
Yeah, it can. Like I mentioned, conversational AI is not a great tool for every area of application, but anywhere where there's a lot of unstructured data, and anywhere where there's a combination of unstructured and structured data that users have to look at, Nesh is a great tool of choice there, because it can then combine all of those information together into one source and be able to query it. So we're not really limited to any specific area of expertise per se, or a specific team, but any team that is kind of dealing with unstructured data on a regular basis within their within the work that they do, conversational AI layer tool like Nesh or any other can be a great fit there.
Right. Thank you so much, Sid. So if we don't have any other question coming in, I would briefly wrap it up. So we are going to share with you all the materials that have been used during the webinar in the next couple of days. Of course, thank you so much, Sid, again, for this amazing webinar. And thank you, everyone, for being here with us this morning. If you want to discover more, please also head over to our website, TechnologyCatalogue.com. And we really hope you like this technology and would like to know it further. Thank you so much, everyone, again, and have a very nice day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.